Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michelle Lamont. I'm professor of sociology and African American studies, and I'm also the director of the Weatherhead Center for International Affairs. And I want to extend a warm welcome to all of you at the Weatherhead Center's 28th Samuel L. and Elizabeth Jodidi Lecture, which is a series that aimed to be one of the most provocative and exciting opportunities for learning and conversation at this university. And as we all know, the bar is very high indeed. So this year's lecture is organized jointly with the Center for Middle Eastern Studies, and we're really delighted at this collaboration. So established in 1955, the series provides, and here I quote from the donors' terms, the delivery of lectures by eminent and well-qualified person for the promotion of tolerance, understanding, and goodwill among nations and the peace of the world. So last year, we had Michael Ignatieff, the current director of the Central European University, and Craig Calhoun, former director of the London School of Economics, who joined us to discuss intellectual freedom. The previous speaker was the Aga Khan, who spoke the day after the Paris bombing about the importance of pluralism in Islam. Other previous speakers have included Andreas Papandreou, former Greek president, influential strategists such as Brzezinski, and individuals recognized for their leadership in global institutions such as Richard Goldstone, a lawyer who played a crucial role in ending the apartheid. But today, we have someone extremely special, the activist and Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Nadia Murad. And I believe that she may be, and maybe I'm wrong, but she's one of the very, very first women to give the Jodidi Lecture. So please join me in welcoming her.
Nadia, look at them. Look on them.
So we're very fortunate that our colleague Jennifer Leaning has agreed to be in conversation with Ms. Murad, and she will formally introduce her, but first I will introduce Jennifer. So Jennifer is professor of the practice of health and human rights at the Harvard T.H. School of Public Health, and associate professor of medicine at the Harvard Medical School. And she's a leading expert of topics that are of enormous importance: human rights and international humanitarian law in crisis settings, human security during forced migration and conflicts, and early warning for mass atrocities. So she has both clinical experience in emergency medicine as well as field experience assessing issues of public health, human rights, and humanitarian law in Eastern Europe, the Middle East, the former Soviet Union, and the African Great Lakes region. She has authored and co-authored reports about violence in conflict zones, and most recently documenting that in the Syrian war for The Lancet in 2018. So this brief summary gives you just a little bit of an idea of what an amazingly courageous and daring person Jennifer is. Her work has real impact on the life of a great many people. She's just enormously talented, so I think we're extremely fortunate that she's agreed to guide the conversation this afternoon. But first, I want to turn the podium to Bill Granera, who is professor of the practice of Arabic on the Gordon Gray Endowment and director of the Modern Language Programs in the Department of Near Eastern Languages and Civilization. He is my co-host today and is a true expert of the region. He will give you some contextual information which will help us understand the importance of Nadia's work. Bill.
Good afternoon, everybody. My comments will be briefer than described. The Center for Middle Eastern Studies at Harvard encompasses a diverse community of scholars, students, researchers, faculty from across the university campus, administrators and support staff, as well as patrons from the wider Cambridge, Boston, and New England areas. On behalf of all the members of our extended family, I welcome today Nadia Murad to our campus. The Middle East region, site of our academic passions and interests, spans the ancient, medieval, and modern worlds, crossing multiple continents and embracing a diversity of languages, ethnicities, races, religions, and cultures. The richness of this diversity in all its cross-cultural fusion continues to inspire and create a treasure trove of literature, music, film, and scholarship. In recent years, and perhaps beyond, the Middle East has been the site of political, religious, and ethnic conflict, war, revolution, political oppression, sexual violence, sectarian conflict, displacement, exile, and forced migration have taken a massive toll on the lives of many of its citizens. And yet, from the stories and images of the global media, emerge from time to time glimmers of hope in the form of individuals who make a difference. Nadia Murad's story is one such glimmer of hope, and we at CMES and the Weatherhead Center for International Affairs feel honored and privileged to welcome Nadia Murad to our campus here today. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming out on what is actually a quite lovely day to meet Nadia Murad and her very accomplished colleague and interpreter, whom I will introduce in a moment. We have now an hour and 20 minutes, and I am delighted to be able to help start this conversation with Nadia. As Bill has said, Nadia comes from the Mideast. She is from the Yazidi community, and I will ask her to talk a bit about her experiences before the attack by ISIS and Daesh in August of 2014, which is really the pivotal moment for that community in northwestern Iraq, and was also very pivotal in both terrible and positive ways in her own life. She is a survivor of that genocidal action, and we'll talk about that. She is an advocate for justice and restitution, two important big words, and we're going to talk about that. And she is the 2018 recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, which all three of these identifiers are fairly extraordinary. And to have this all bundled up as accolades and experiences for someone her age is a burden as well as an accelerant to the rest of her life. She is joined, and we will really be in conversation together, by Shanaz Asso, who is also from the community, has been here for a longer time, and she flew in this morning from Lincoln, Nebraska. We're all delighted that she arrived, given flights and the Northeast weather. And she has extensive experience working as an interpreter and translator with the Yazidi and other minority communities who have fled the Mideast. I just want you to understand that we will be doing a translation in a mode that I find most easy, and both Shanaz and Nadia are very familiar with it, which is that I will talk to you, Nadia. You will hear this. You will look at Nadia and interpret, and then Nadia, you will look back at me, or you can obviously look at the crowd, and then Shanaz will translate. So it'll be a little bit of a round robin of the three of us. I also personally and sort of as a citizen of the university would like to thank the Weatherhead Center and the Center for Middle Eastern Studies for sponsoring this event and for the very intrepid route you must have taken to secure Nadia's presence here today. So I think it's a gift to all of us that we're having this conversation. So a few notes about today's program. We will not have any questions. You will find that the back and forth, the translation, et cetera, will consume this time quite productively. We also, you may hear me talk with Shanaz to get some clarification from her response from Nadia, and that's just the back and forth that will happen, but it will all be on mic, and it will be sort of instructive if you find me not understanding one of Nadia's answers. Probably it means that some of you don't understand it either, so we'll work that way. So she wants to talk about her work since her terrible experiences in August, September, October, November of 2014. We will be talking about the edges of that attack and her captivity, but we will not be delving into the details. I can tell you that there are a number of places where she has told her story, and one is very easy to Google. It's the December 2016 testimony and briefing that she gave to the UN Security Council. Just Google her name, December 2016, UNSC, and it will just come right up. And that's a very important and painful and moving account. She also has a book that's out, and I think a copy of it is around for people to see, and the Harvard Bookstore has ordered many more copies, so that will be available. And there's a wonderful report that you can see on her website that is called Sinjar 2018, the Siege of Sinjar, which is a very thoughtful and, from a humanitarian standpoint, very wise document about what happened and what needs to be done now. So I commend those background points to you as you listen and think you have more questions. Some of them will be answered by the route I just outlined. And just to add to the background that Bill gave, so Sinjar is in northwestern Iraq. I'm hoping some of you have a copy of the map that we gave out. It's not a great map. I wanted a topographical map, but that is hard. But in any case, that basically gives you a picture of the state of play in the war and the way that ISIS was moving across the swath of northwestern Iraq at the time of this attack. And it also, you can see in tiny print, there's Sinjar right up there in that northwestern sector. And there is a mountain, which is a little hard to see because it's not topographical, but there's a very important mountain that goes sort of at right angles to the border between Iraq and Syria. And it's called the Sinjar Mountain. And that is a sacred place for the Yazidis. They've been there, I think, at least since 600 AD, I mean, maybe earlier. And the community of Yazidis was about 500,000 before the attack. And they lived on different sides of the mountain, the south side of the mountain and the north side of the mountain. And it had different experiences in the ISIS attack. The aspect of what she's going to talk about is all tied up in the US-Iraq fight to get rid of ISIS, going north, dealing with ISIS in Mosul, and as you are aware, in March of 2019, the last bastion where there was a residential component of ISIS has been bombed to oblivion on the Syrian side of the border. But as you also all know, that's not the end. And there are a number of women coming out of those bunkers and hellholes who are now 72,000 of them, and other people from that area are now being held in Kurdish-controlled areas of Syria. So this is an ongoing series of atrocities, and we're talking about a moment in time which is pivotal for her and the Yazidi community. Do you want to summarize any of that, or did you understand what I said pretty much?
I understand.
Okay. And have I somewhat accurately portrayed it? Do you want to comment or make a correction?
She said you did very well summarizing it.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. We didn't practice this, so I'm delighted it's worked. Okay, so now we're going to go into these questions. They've heard a little bit about how I'd like to proceed, but we'll change it up depending on how Nadia wants to reply and where her thoughts take her. But I thought it would be helpful, certainly to me and to you, for us to understand what living in the Yazidi community was like prior to this terrible attack. So what was your childhood like? What was it like growing up? Did you have to help in the field and weed the fields? Could you play? Just give us an idea of those good times.
هنجت الرادبوي هنجت زاروكي وكا حالتي شلو متسد مع تورا بوي هبالي تهبون ليستي بيرا
البري وكا از كجكتايا يانز دخوشكو برابم هشت برا ودخوشكا از همو بداك خورت تعايشين الجندة كتات كنا جندة كوجو جندة تاليا الجنوبي شنغاليش جندة إيزيديا بيحتريت كبيانيف عليا عربا واندا.
She grew up with 11 siblings, 8 brothers and 2 sisters, and they all lived with their mother in a village named Kojo, and that falls more closer to the Arabic territory of Iraq.
البا وكا كأم كإزدي تشتي إز حلمي من سر دينوس كم إزدي تشينا از بيتر حلمي ما إجداك خوا وكما وكا أديانو أو ديتر ما كتاب نبون مهرب بخواندين وكا تشتكي سر ما فرض نينا إنه لازما بحلمن بس وكا عادات وتقاليد خوا كإزدي تشينا مش عائلة خوا وشملات خوا خواندي كاتشي.
Learning about Yazidism all came through oral religion because we didn't have a book that we could read every day. So my mother taught us through stories and just lessons here and there. And even as adults, we are still learning because there's nothing that's written down to teach us about our culture and religion. It's up to previous generations to sort of pass it on.
This says something about why killing people wipes out a culture. This is clearly an oral tradition. And what did you do all day as you were growing up?
تني بو مش معلمة شما مدرسة بر أساك تشكتري بو الوقت مدى وكا سهل بو الركز شما مدرسة بر عائلة ما وكا خلق الجن دي بلنجاز بو وخشكو برايد ما يبدأ كامرة لازم وبشغلن الخدان كرنا بس وشاندنا ورازية از 11 سال از شما مدرسة داني سبهين مدرسة شوم از داني إيواري بيتر بقيت مرة شاندن مدكر.
I went to school. I was the only one to go to school because during the time that I was in school, it was peaceful in our village. I was the youngest of all my siblings, and so I was able to go to school and learn during the mornings, and then at night I would go and help my siblings on the farm and growing our crops.
What kind of crops, and did you have any animals?
وقتی داعش هاتیم ما سدو و بیست باز هبون تزانی بشی الچاندنی ما همودشت الگندات همودشت ما چاندن همو تشتی چاندنی تزانی وکا خيار و طماط و بیواز و کسکتای همو تشتی بهتری هکا وکا تعرف فروتن مازن بو جهو جنم البرسبايا بس همو علي خوار نيوان ما تيدا چان.
When ISIS attacked, we had 120 sheep on our farm. We also grew all sorts of vegetables, tomatoes, cucumbers, but our most profitable one that we made a living off of was growing wheat and grains.
It's a dry area, so was there irrigation? How did you manage that? With wheat, it takes water.
هیچ كدنيا شنقال ديم مشكلة آفها إجبار آف نبول باما كيم بوجلك باران كيم تات بجمع بيرد كولان بير كولان أوجي تقريبا بيترش بيت عليه تدكشتي هفتي متري حتى آفي تهرد كر وكهرب جنيا باجبو بس وقت تإرادة هبي وتبيت بكار بكي وقت زاني معيشة تاسر ومستقبلتها غير ويتشتينينا وقت بهمو قوة خود حاوليني كتشتبدا برين.
Sinjar has always been a very dry area. We've always had issues with water and getting rain. And so in order to be able to grow our crops, we would dig wells, sometimes down to 70 feet. But when you know that that is your way of life and that's how you make a living, you're willing to go to all ends to make it work.
Before I move on, is there something else you'd like to tell us about your childhood?
وكم بس بإنه سبيشم الوي وقتي ده ما تشتكيش دنياي في دنياي ونزاني متشن نبيز بسر في تشتي وكجامبو تشتي هري خوشتري وقت بشتي روجا كدريش إيفاريز بعائلة خورتروني ما تشتي هري خوشتري بالبامه من زاني تشيل مشاكل وتش سياسة وتش جريمة وتشتي الدنياي ده تشيت بن أو روج وسبيشم أو بستويك سالي ما بعائلة خو خالكي قندي خورة درباس كري
Hold that, so we'll do it in 2 times. Okay, what did she say there so far?
She said, I would just like everybody to know, before all of this happened, I didn't know that there was this sort of evil and, suffering in the world. I thought the best thing after a long day was to go home and relax with my family, and I thought that was the best thing in the world. And I didn't know any better that there was anything better than that or worse than that in the world.
Finish. I interrupted you. What else?
أفوكا يعني أفتشتي أو بويز بهرناكم إنه بيستويك سالمة بعائلة خو خلكي خور درباس كريز بسلامتي ببلنغازي بخوشي إز بهرناكم أزي كهرب من جارك دي وسا وخوشي وسلامتي ببين من سربيار.
She said, I spent 21 years, me and my family just having this simple life, this peaceful life. But since this has happened, I don't think we can ever go back to the way that things were before.
This is an experience that, in a much less drastic way, all of us have as we grow up. We can't go home again because it's always different. But what you're saying is extraordinarily profound.
Am hamu madviam waka kachkani bendisane basam nikaran vagarina kachkani om nikaran disane vagarina marga lagjara una waka barea bas ditch biji galake abnasa u galake yani تشتكى تديتي بيسترا جيكا ماديتي.
إن مسألة إنه مروب بقريك كان ياخو بس مسألة أو خوشي وكا مازنتاي وكا بكتشكتاي إركي بيهتر وكدري يشتر بوامد في أو وقت مبوان را بحيلا خورا بتشتكيش دنياي نزاني جبان مشكلة ومد في ما بيهتر درباس كربا بلا على الأقل 10 سال ديتر با ونو دراج تكي واحد با يعني وخوشا اسكتيمه وكا بلكي كان هو الوربا يا كيش بان طالبه هم الوربا قلت بزل في حياتها بزحمه او وقت قوتي بي بتني اثناء قديم مدفي على الاقل حمركي ركي دي يشتري الوي حياتي ذاك الببلا دي ساف نخوشي من ديبا.
She said, I not only have wanting to go back to childhood itself, but even just going back to that simple time, to keep it for a little bit longer, even if the genocide did happen, just keeping, that simple life, that peaceful life that we had for even 10 more years, and being able to go back to that mind state. Anybody here would have thought, going to a farm that is dry and in the desert and doesn't get water might have been difficult, but for us it was, that was our life and that's what we enjoyed, and it was peaceful for us, and that was all we knew. And she just wants to be able to go back to that and just experience that a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, you were very young when things were taken away from you. And so it is, thank you for sharing this, because it's a big loss. And let's hope there will be a chance for you to return, but it will not be the same place. You know that.
I know.
Yep.
Yeah.
So give us, if you could, just 3 or 4 sentence outline of what happened on that day, August 3rd, August 4th, 2014. How did you hear of what was happening? How did you try to protect yourself? And then it's over and you are caught. Just quickly.
السيسي معها هشت بولده 2014 والوي وقتي العراق والشنغالي الدنيا قلق يا قرمة يعني وقتي هري قرم دري الوي دري وكما زاني داعش كتا عراقي كتا موصل وتلحفر وجوي دوا بس نهات بباروما يعني ما نزاني تشتكي هوي ما زنوي تشيبي بس ما زاني وقت جريمة نوكرينا تشتني وساوا تفيفي بترجمة جدا.
On August 3rd, when they attacked, it was one of the hottest times of the year in Sinjar. And they had heard that ISIS was attacking, Mosul and Tel and other villages around them, but they didn't think that something this big would happen around them, but they kind of knew it was, kind of inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
وكب إيفارس سيهاشت إركب بحسابه إنه ترسنوا تشوي الجندين دي تيز ديوان عمل سرخيني نفستيبون قال كي براويد ما بتلفون وان بيفتن إجبار إزدي وكمل تكي كتشكا يكودو ناس كرين في جبر ساخة يوان شكودو كرين قال كي موبايل بيفتن أم أزوخ كد موكا جد برامو أم دهاتن ملحوشيدا نفستن ماكو هارا وسرخيني وانا نتبيبنو جم كارمن بنفن إجبار ما نزاني بوجتكي هوي ما زني
Her brothers were sleeping on the roof on August 3rd, and her sisters and sister-in-laws were sleeping in the yard because her brothers on the roof kept calling people on the phone to try and figure out what was happening. They spent the entire night on their phones, so her and her sisters and sister-in-laws slept in the yard so they can actually get some sleep.
تشتهر يودري ميزانيس بهين زودة بس خلكي جو خلكي باز تاع خلكي درت كاتوكا موبايل بنوحس أم زود الرابون قوتن داعش كتيا شنغالدا وخلكي تلفونو قرنو ما يجكو أم جكي باسن جبار وقت أنه قوتي الشنغال هم يدم هم بس أو جاهية وبازانا ممي بازنا ويجاي.
So, say that.
So first thing in the morning, the next day, they had heard that people were being attacked and that they were escaping to the mountains. And
So going up.
Yes, escaping up the mountain to try and get safety, and they were calling them on the phone to try and get a hold of them and figure out what was going on. Her and her family wanted to escape as well, but like you said, there was just that mountain was their only place to go.
أو جيتشا إيش ما يدور بو ما نكاري وجندي موجا كوتش وجندي هاري تالية وش جندي تيزديا زو أم قرتن دورا ما قرتن بس وكدورا ما قرتن وفيجو دورا تلفونو دعتن وهر نقلت خابر عند كوتن أفهاتا كوشتن وأفجهشتا جيو وقت تشتكي نايا وصف عندن كشندي ما زن بوجتهات يتشيبونش لحظة هارد بريد.
So they had heard, that ISIS was attacking, and they were too far from the mountain, and so they didn't think that they'd be able to make it to escape from the mountain. They didn't have very many options either, and they kept hearing people say, you know, so-and-so got caught, so-and-so escaped and is on the mountain, and Kojo, which is her village, is right on the edge of the Yazidi territory, so they were very quick to be surrounded by ISIS, and they had ran out of options at that point.
Okay, so let's go after that, okay? Go, say, to the last week, and if you can give all of us that date, the last week of your captivity. And what were you thinking? And how did you begin to imagine your escape?
وكان روجا داعش هاتي أم تشيلو هشت نفرش معلا ما بتنم هاتنا قرتن ويت هاتنا كشتن بيشتر وكا مرة معين آنين سيكا جد براي مبون أو جي تشون وكاش محالنا قد كرين من نزاني تشبيه كيش همو كهاتيا وقت تبكى فيها خطرية كما زندبو وداعش تشتيت عاده بيرامه وكان نفسها مبوكا جوا زي جارك دي زي خلاص بميانا.
When her family was finally caught by ISIS, there was about 48 of them that were all captured together, and her nieces were kind of separated from the rest of the family, and then her nieces were separated from her also. And the whole time she was thinking, you know, when something like this happens, you kind of have to think about yourself, like, will I survive, won't I survive, and how will I do it?
إجبار بزحمات بود بفكر أو كتاكي إزدي إنه خلاص بإجبار داعش هاتما يكب ما بين وكان هاد مساعدة كما إنقاذ بك داعش خلكوش تلويدري والجادة حسران دين مساعدة نبو وكا الدنيا مو دركتو داعش بنفسها خسر تلفزيون دركتو وقوتم تشبيز ديوان كن إجبار وكم أمل بشر نبو كأزبي ما خلاص كرين بس أمل بخوده ونفسه خوها بو كده وكد ريك هبي أز خلاص بم.
She began kind of losing hope and thinking that there's no way that the Yazidis will survive this. And she kept seeing that there was, you know, ISIS even going on TV, and everybody was hearing about what was happening, but nobody was coming to help. So as she was beginning to lose hope in, you know, the international community doing something, she started to have more hope in herself to survive and hoping that God will take over and help her survive this.
Were you able to move around a bit? I'm thinking just physically. Now you're speaking of yourself as a survivor already. You know, you have to save yourself. Nobody's coming, can't count on the family. Was there a wall you were going to have to get over? Was there a door you were going to have to get out of? Just give us this scene of what you were imagining. If I go down there, he'll stop me. If I go here, maybe at night he's out doing something and I can do it. How were your plans evolving?
نبزح مادة إيش مقر داعش دركفي إنه هجي وهذا بار وديم نبزح ماد بوتش مقر دركفي دريها بو مثلا دري فاكريت الدركفي بس بزح ماد بوت ياكي بيني مساعداتها بكا إجبار بهزارة خلقي وكاتشكو إسناس كمو هفالد مدركات إنه ريها بو دريد فاكري مو بس كنا معلا بس ياكي خدانا كنو داعش فكران بيجا أسهل بوت تكاربي ريكي بيني كالدري رشباكي كالشران ديم بس بزحمات بوتي ياكي بيني مساعداتها بكن.
It was actually very easy to escape. It was just difficult to survive past that. Many of her friends that she knew had escaped just simply through a door or a window, but once they would go and try to find a family to either take them in or help them or contact somebody, they would return them back to ISIS. So it was difficult once you got out to stay out and find somebody to help you and take you in. So
let's create this scene for people here. It's Was it night or day that you chose to leave?
وەکە بەریڤاری.
It was closer to night.
Okay. And were you in an unfamiliar part of your territory, or did you understand where you were?
ئەو جارە بەری بوو ئەس چوومە مووسڵ ئەس هیچکردنیای نەچوو مێدا.
She was in Mosul, and that was the first time she'd ever been there, and so she did not recognize anything there.
And did you know enough to know that you were going to have to get to Kurdish areas for help? And how far away was that? Or did you have a sense of a town or a village to go to? What made the difference between your not getting turned in and all your other friends who did?
وەکە کورد المووسڵ نەبوون ئەوش بەر خەڵکی مووسڵ بتنێ بوو بەس وەختێ چە کوردستان و هینگە کوردستان وەکە جێکەتە ببیە نازە حلوێ دەرێ ئەس وەکە شتێ مێد فێز دەرکەبم وەختێ دەرکەتیم مالی نتگەڤن گەلک مالی نتگەڤن وەربوون وەکە ئەمەلی مێ هەبوو ئەنو خەلکێک ژبەرز العیلەکە بەلەنگاز دەڕابوون بەس عیلەکە گەلێکە وەکە دلێوانی بڕەحم بوو بێجە كده دلم إنه كعائلة بلنجاز وخلقي بلنجازي الكده ربي بلقي هرب رحم بندوكا ياك بنك تشدين بي وتشملات بي.
She had hope in herself and had hope that because she came from a very peaceful and well-known family that she could, that there was other people that were like her family and had a good heart like her family. And so there was some very old homes there that she, thought that maybe those would be a good idea, but she kind of...
Old homes in Mosul?
Yeah.
Yes.
That might have Yazidis in it or just nice people?
Nice people.
Okay, yeah.
And so she thought, if there's people that are similar to my family in, morals and values, that they'll recognize somebody that comes from a background like them and maybe take me in.
I wondered about the 120 sheep that was on your farm. So your family was somewhat well off compared to others.
إن وكا جارة بريدة بابي خوشككو براك هبون اتيم بون وي وقتي وكانت دولتي بون أردوي وانا بو الوان منطقة الشنغال وعراق وان كاتا أرد هبي وين جيتي دولتي في جمع أرد نبو ما ديم أرد خلقيت كرتو ما كانت شوي كم عائلة كبلنجاز بون بس أم ديم وكب كرامات تعيشين ما حوجة كينات كير ما كارش قرر.
Her family wasn't very well off. Her dad only had one brother and one sister, and they were actually orphaned. And the only way to have real wealth in Iraq is to have land, and they didn't have any land. So they would actually farm other people's lands for them in order to kind of be able to get to that level. And they kind of just kept to themselves. They were very, independent and just did their work and got by.
So you knock on a door of an old house in the evening, or is it by then morning? And what do you say to people when they answer the door?
أما غير قوتي أجبار العراق ده الموصل ده هم زاني تشب إزدهات أو الموصل هم ده زانين كتش كده إزدال ودريوانن ما غير قوتي إنه أزدخيل وز إزدي ما مساعدان بك.
شابويا
بريباري.
It was still evening, and she just sort of knocked on the door, and everybody at that point in Mosul and in Iraq altogether knew what had happened to the Yazidis and what was going on. So she just sort of knocked and said, I'm a Yazidi, I've escaped, will you help me?
Wonderful. So who answered the door?
Babi one.
It was the father.
The father?
Yeah.
An older man?
Yeah.
Yes.
And what did he say? Give us a little sense of what the next 5 minutes was like. You knocked, he opens, you say you're a Yazidi. Can you help me? And what does he say, and how does it unfold?
از درباسي مع الكرم درباسي زكي حوشة وكا بيخترب نكى مثلا برسنو ديش مكرن قلتش كيش فان مقرأ وجوان هاتي جبر أو جي إركي وكل ويبزحمت بيجبر هكا داعش ديبانا أو بلكي تعدلوان كربانا بس وكأت يعني ملي دراني إنه ناف يعني إجبر مثلا ملي دراني إنه نبدأ عشرين إجبر همو المال دبونو وكا شغلك يعني خياب إنه علاقتك أو نبدأ عشرين.
So he invited her in and started asking her more questions about kind of who she was, where she was from. And the man kind of showed some concern because if ISIS found out that he was helping her, then his family might be in danger too. And she could tell just from looking around, you know, his whole family was home, and she could tell that, you know, they weren't affiliated with ISIS at all. And that made her feel more safe around them.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think persuaded him, or did the wife or other family members chime in? What do you think persuaded him to say, yes, I'm going to help you?
إجبار وكا علاقتك بلكي نبوي يعني نبوي فكري ربون مجارك دي نادي الناس بجميع كانت تشكر مساعدان بكن بس جارك وكم تلفوني وان قلت إجبار قلت إنه علاقتك ما بدأ 10 نبو وأم وقت مناش ترسيبة وكم تدبين انتاجي همو يك عراق ويك ملات راس الدين المختلف بس همو عراقي بونو شوية كي وكا ادفان مساعدة.
She said that he kind of said that regardless of religion, they were all still Iraqis. They didn't agree with what ISIS was doing, and they didn't have any affiliation with them as either. And that, you know, they need to take compassion because regardless of what her beliefs are and what their beliefs are, they're all still one Iraqi community.
Mm-hmm. You're lucky in that regard, aren't you?
Yes.
That you found a good family.
جنبرا من أوجه وساكر وأبي زارو أبو وبازا وكتمالك بس ومالي وقت برس شوي كريش باكي داعشي هاتيا نفسها ما يدير باسي مال كرنو بس داعشي ورا تلفون كرنو هاتن برن يعني نهمو نهر يكي وكحاضي ما هبوك خلاص بي.
Not everybody was as lucky as her. Her sister-in-law did the same thing and escaped, knocked on somebody's door, and the person who answered the door did the same thing and invited her in, asked her some questions like which, ISIS members she escaped from and things like that, and eventually called those ISIS members and got her taken back.
Mm-hmm. In some settings where people flee and there's a person who really helps early on and it's critical, that can be somewhat life-affirming after your experience has deadened your feelings about humanity. And I'm going to just ask, but I think you get a sense that this is really important. I mean, this family, I'm not going to go into how long they sheltered you, et cetera, but this family was pivotal in, at least initially, really important initially, in helping you get out and start another life. Is that correct?
يعني السؤال هناك مشتا يعني تشندل باوي ومالي ماي بس وان قلك في دل تكرن دات كاربي إيش دست داعش دركبي وشويالي دركبي وتصاغ بينها.
أكيد هكا مساعدين نبا وهكا منوبان خدان بلكي داعش دي ساز كرت بعمل دركي شوان راهكا بفيان ويدي سمد دنوان باقير نوان بس با مساعدة كرن كاس بقى مع حياتك سلامتش نبتسدو.
She believes that if she hadn't found a family like this that had helped her, she likely would have either been returned or wouldn't have made it. So it is very important that they were willing to help her, and because of that, she was able to, get out and have this safe and happy life, or somewhat happy life that she has now.
Mm-hmm. Do they know what has happened to you? Does that family understand who you've become?
Yes, أزانين إيش برزانين شبيز جوان هذا وكم هناك إيش قصة ما جرقوج.
She was able to tell them a little bit of her story while she was with them as well, and so they kind of know what was going on with her before.
But now,
Zan
have you called them and said, I got the Nobel Peace Prize, for instance?
وكأسبيرنا بيفتم إشغير بشتم وصلوا حررين مجودا براي خوا براي ما جود جوزبان ربا يفتما إنه داعش وان أون تشتك بينا هاتيا بس بالعراق وان همو وكا همو زانن وقت تشتك شيء بالعراق ده أج زانن بنيكي شيء بوهم همو وكا إنه هو وكا بيترش تشتاش يكودو زانن.
She hasn't spoke to them directly, but when Mosul was freed, basically, her brother was able to tell them and speak to them and kind of tell them what's been happening with Nadia and what's been going on. And Iraq is a very tight-knit community anyway. Anything that happens, everybody knows about it. So she's sure that they had heard about it anyway and know what's going on.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. I'm going to move now to another set of questions, which is when did you shift from finding a way to survive to finding a way to make a difference?
كنجي وقف فكرة بدليج لازم از الصاغم ولازم از وقف في ديل خلقي دي بكم.
وكاكا أزب أبراستي بيجم إنه نل بيشافيد مبو إنه أزي تركبم كما في روجي ونا تشتمد فيها إنه أزب تاليا ما ياخد عن تخرب بعيشم الدركب أمان وكمان نزاني إنه أزي دركبم بيفمشي بس وقتی یک داد مثلا برساکوت که مدکم اجبار گلک ازیل دستی داعش دینام زانن چبوان تین وعائلت ما قصت تقول ما تقول افتش تبو ما هاتكر انه هبوان تاكرين هكا وخلاص ناكر يعني من زاني زي روجك اجبرنا الاوامر تبو يعني نا بلان بوش مره ونا هدف بوش مره روجك انه ازبيم دركب مو هب افتش مازن ببي.
This was never part of her plan. Her plan or her hope was just to get out and live somewhere safe with her family. But then people would come and start talking about what was going on and asking questions. And she felt that she needed to inform them, this is what was happening to us. So this is likely what's happening to girls still in captivity. And something needs to be happening. And so it was never her plan to be a public speaker or an advocate or an activist. It just kind of happened. She felt that it needed to be done, but it was never part of a big plan for her.
وكبري از ببيفم كاتشكيت كلا كاتشكيت ازد يا ضحية تشونو بيفتنو أو وكا نأزبتني مكاس بيفتم قالك البيش من شون بيفتن قالك كتابة خوات شكرين بصحافة مهم راب مقالة وتشتت مهم نبيسين قالك جيل بيش مبيفتن بس وكا جارنا إنه تشتن شيد بي إنه ياك قصتت كهاد النهاية هم يجا قصتها مو بخويا ببن.
She's not the only person to speak out on this or the only survivor to speak out on this. There's been plenty of girls before her and at the same time as her speaking about their experiences as well on a large scale and even writing their own books. But sometimes one person's story just resonates with the world and it's just what everybody else picks up on and it just happens to become bigger.
I think of course you're correct in what you're saying because it's your life and you know what happened. But there are probably some factors in your thinking that made you get more organized about wanting to make a difference. And you may not identify them in you yet, but as you say, the story of the Yazidi came out. It was not that well known, but it came out. And there were many testimonies that the newspapers found, et cetera. And I'm sure the women who survived were talking to each other. But then out of that mix of testimony and anger and grief, somehow you took all of that feeling and began to say you wanted a campaign. How did that turn? When did you start using the word campaign?
مش راسته يعني كلكا بريت بيفتي وي وقتي كتت بيفتي أوجي بيفتن هنجي ووانجي وك صارفة خقوتو بس كلكا وك صارفة حس كرن و كلكا وك trying to figure out وك خباري وان بيفتن و بس تدقوت وكا كامبين أكتبه نت بس تا صارفة خود قو نبس تبيفتي تدقو كامبين أكتبه كانجي تدقو وكا لازم كامبين أكبه
وكم وقتي تشتي بيتر ازدافع عندي إنه مش خلكيس حلمي إنه هنا كهك جريمة أو كري إنه تشتي كشتنو اغتصابو كرتشنا محكمة جامنا وكا مثلا كشتنو أو بتني هنجي وكا بيتر أوش مرة تشبو إنه لازمة كما إفادة خدان روجكي محكمة بي أو كرين يعني روجكي أموان داعش المحكمة ببينن بيتر وكا أقلمش في كرتجبر إيرون إن أزين نزان ست هزاري داعش هاتن كي هاتا كشتن.
Pause for a second, because I want to hear her words now. What is she saying in really direct translation now?
So the thing that pushed her is because she had always had this idea, if you do a crime such as murder, you need to be brought to justice. And so it wasn't just, getting the story out. It was about bringing the members of ISIS that did these heinous crimes to justice and bringing them in front of an international court and making them kind of pay for their crimes that they've done. And everybody at some point is going to be judged in front of a court for their sins.
So were you, as a little child, as a kid, you had a strong sense of right or wrong, and if somebody did something wrong, they should get punished?
Of course, yeah. وكم الباما مثلا هكا وكتجي بزاني يعني هكا العائلة ده هكا يكي يعني هكا خوش كمي بلا يعني تشتشتي أو جناري مثلا بازخوا نما چاندنت كير وقت جنار ما چاندنت كروسي بابون ورازيبون جناري ما بازوي هات بايا كد باوي كستي وچاندنا ما كريو خوار باب تنبربا لازم بوتشتك چبي بينا با عائلة ما وبيجن قصوري عفو كين ما نزاني تعباواتشو يا اجدالاوي چاندني وكا ترافكين ما فاقيرن يا عائلة ما يبجي با مادم ونزاني وبازوي هات بوتشتكي عادية ومبيك هاتن وقت الهمو تشتي الهمو آلي لازم بو عدالة وبيك هاتن هابا.
She believes that there always has to be some sort of reconciliation for things. For example, if they had planted a bunch of wheat and one of their neighbor's sheep got into their plants and ate all of it, the neighbor can't just say, whatever. They have to come and apologize and say, we're sorry, all your hard work went to waste, let us pay for the plants, or let us buy them off of you, or, here's a sheep to make up for it. So actions should have consequences.
But الوي وقتي جنبو أو عدالة هرم يستري يعني جنبو تشتهري مهم دري إنه تحقيق ببي وقتي بيت عباتا أشاندني ابتنا ببا من زاني وكا ميستر هاي إنه ياك بيت عبا داك كوكا داك عمي كيانز زارو بلنغازي خدان كربين ياك بي وسبكو جو اغتصابك وهاي عدالة وكا
As a kid, though, she thought that was the worst thing, was to have, your hard work go to waste with the farm or the crops. She didn't know that there was something as horrible as a mother, like her own mother's hard work going to waste, raising 11 kids and having them all be killed.
Yeah, okay. So if you're thinking about something that is overwhelmingly wrong, that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I know that you have found some good friends and colleagues, and even that is a talent, to reach out to people when you are feeling so overwhelmed with sadness, to reach out to people and have them come towards you and you build something together. That to me is a really interesting aspect of your biography, that it's a short 2 years from August 2014 till when one can see you before the UN Security Council in December 2016. That is a long pathway to go. I'm going to ask you about some of the friends, some of the people, not everybody, but 2 or 3 that helped shape your agony, your pain, into the search for justice. During those 2 years, who did you encounter? Who did you talk to?
وكل في شغلي واندا وباشتباب ازديا هادي از بجم بيتر جنا قضي دراني وازديا وكا في جاري كش علي ديني باو كزلاما ريدا ما كم ببايبن كجن بلكي ازديت اتهمو دراليك رابون ودعمايك ودوكرن كريب انما ببايبنو افادة خبدن افتشتي هري مهمتر يبوجبر التاريخ ما كايزدي تاريخ عراقي دا جن درنا كتنا بايفتل سر اختصاب الروسر إبادة هاد ما زنرا.
She says that one of the very important things was the fact that many women were speaking out about the things happening. So a lot of the women involved had a big influence on the kind of progress that has been made, because in the history of all the genocides and the history of Iraq, women haven't spoken out about the things that have happened to them during these sorts of events, and all of the women that were giving their accounts of things that happened to them and giving their stories and their side of things made a very big impact and was very important, and kind of set the stage for it and pushed the whole process more, to be able to have them speak out against what has happened. And it caused like an international outcry because the women were finally speaking out about it, and it made everybody want to get more involved.
That's a point we should underscore, isn't it? That in many of these situations, women who've been through sexual violence are not talking about it. They get quiet. And their husbands and fathers and brothers don't want them to talk. It's considered shameful. And the fact that something in your community, in your friends, in your survivor community, including you, wanted to speak out about it is a remarkable accelerant, a remarkable boost to getting action taken. If you talk, then people understand. And that, I think, has made a very big difference.
هكا جن وسانه بني چپی هاتیت بیجن چهتر وساش برگلک زلام وکا ناست کنو گوه خود دنیتی هکا او کاربن بیجن وکا افتشت ما هاتیا ولازم وتشتكي بكن اش برگلک جارا برای روانیا عیال روانیا بابی روان ناوین وان تشتا بیجنا خلقه بس هكا جن کاربن وان تشتا بیجنا خلقه چهتر اش برگلک زلامات وین مساعده بكن.
وكان هم جمجو التجارة التاريخي مدى جن درنا كتبو ونبايد بو ونبس إزدي جنا عراقي يعني همونا بايد بو سربي تشترى وفعلا تشتكي بحيبو تشتكي نهجي بحيبة تدار كبي وقالافي تشتي اختصابي وان بكي خاصة الور بلكي الفر سهل بين بس الور بزحمة سر تحيبة سر عائلة تحيبة سر ملاتي تحيبة وسر قندي تحيبة بيجا تشتكي مازن بو دار كبي بس بجنا دركت إجبار تشتي هري مستري البا داعشي هاتي ديدين جنادي وجنا قاريش عالم را خياكن كأو تشوب.
In the past, not just to Yazidis, but Iraqi women in general, they haven't spoken out about these things. And it's very important that they have been speaking out now, because in the past, it's even more of a stigma than it is here in America. You know, it's a very large stigma to talk about rape or, you know, things of that nature. They oftentimes see it as bringing shame to themselves or even their village and their family. But the women saw the roughest parts of what ISIS was doing, and they had to endure the hardest part of the genocide. And so being able to speak out against it was very important, because they are the ones that went through it.
They're also the ones who survived with very deep scars. ISIS killed a lot of the men, right? I mean, so if you're going to take charge of a cause for your community, the women, even injured, were going to be necessary. That's a question, even though I said it like a statement.
بس الجن لازم هي تساغون وفان تشتازان بيتشيبوينا.
مير هاتنا كشتن ما نجوج هتانها حتى روجا إيرو هفتي وياك كم كوجي مقبرة جماعي هاتنا ديتن الشنقادة بقيت ميرا ويت هناك جناجي جن هاتا كشتن البعد داعش إجبار ديتن إنه جن لازم بيستربي بياكرن يعني مير أو كميرا وإيا كشتن وأبا جن لازم بيتر تعدا يعني ديم الحرب هذا وديم الإبادة هذا لازم جن بيتر تعدي ببيني هكا تكي جني ببيني إيزدي وبيجات خوازي أجي دحيا طلقة كوان باما نا دحيا ويتعدا بيساك المهات فكرة.
The men were often killed, and she forgot to mention they have found 71 other grave sites that many of the men and women were found. But in almost every war, women endure the most, and especially with this last genocide, they made sure that women endured the most and saw the most heartache and suffering. And if you ask any Yazidi woman, she has been through the most and will often say that she wishes that she were just killed like one of the men rather than having to endure that.
So let's talk for a moment now. Let's change the subject a little bit. And I'm most interested in your argument around genocide. And I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about that. Is that okay?
وهناك سؤال اشتكى إجبار كتدفع بيجنبه genocide. Amnina?
Yes.
So when you're growing up on your farm, you did not know the word genocide, and you didn't learn about it in school because you were young. Yes? Yeah. And as you know, having worked on this topic, it is a very alive and current problem in the world, genocide. When did you realize that what you had experienced, you and your people, when did you realize that that actually was a genocide?
كان كده زاني أفتشتك إزدي أبوي genocide.
ما كجينوسايد كناف من يبشتي بفرمانوان من زاني بس وقت مير بهزارات عتنا كشتن وقت أو خال كل جادة محاصر بو وقت ريك نبو أم دركبن أم چما نزاني چما سيري ما هنگيگو فرمانه بيجال با إزدي وقت تبيجي فرمانه بمعنى تاليا تايا تاليا ملادي تايا.
She hadn't ever even heard the word genocide before this, but she knew when there was thousands of men being killed and women being taken and thousands of people being trapped on the mountain with nowhere to go and nowhere to escape, that they were calling it the Kurdish or Kurmanji word farman, which is a very common word that they all know, and it basically means the end. And they didn't realize that that was what that was a genocide.
Genocide is the end.
Yeah.
That's the aim of genocide, isn't it?
Yeah.
To destroy, annihilate. So when did you decide you were going to argue about that? You were going to make the case that what happened to the Yazidi was a genocide, a 21st century genocide, one of the most recent ones now. What made you decide to use the word? Did you have a lawyer friend? Did you,
Yeah, وقت ما دركتي نماديتن في جنو مزاني إنه أفر معنا بجنين معنوي بإنجليزي genocide معنوي أفا إبادة قالك محاميد باش مرة شغلين حتى نهاجي وكأمل كلوني لويس مورينو كامبو قالك محاميد باش كيست مبدأ خواقرتينا از شما با قالك برلمانيا قالك الرئيسة قالك سياسية مشوان رجو كأفتش تيد به نما وكان نما زاني أفتش ما هاتي genocide.
She's going to have to translate. So there were a lot of important people there.
Yes, so after she had escaped, they started kind of connecting the pieces and figuring out that Farman meant genocide in English, and that it was the same thing. And they worked with a lot of different very famous and very influential attorneys such as Amal Clooney, Luis Moreno Ocampo, and they met with with other parliament members and started piecing together, figuring out that this was indeed a genocide.
وقالك وكا هرو ما تشتكي نودر تاني مثلا جده هزارو چارده ده چبو هرو مقبرك داتا كفشكرين هرو عدد إذا حيا مزاني كي ناقل دراهاتي ناكشتين داعش بنفسها خودر كاتو وقوت إنه أف ملات لازم كخلاص بهم أفكا جوجني دوانن أمد بينو سبيعينو وكا بيها كأم جيب بيفن داعش بشكلكي علني أف تجدكو درابو دركتو سوران دو كاتشكريا.
So they were, every day they're learning new information about what was happening. Different villages that were being killed, different graves, mass graves that were being found, different areas of Sinjar that were being destroyed basically. And it wasn't just Yazidi accounts saying, this is genocide. ISIS actually came out and said, our goal is to end Yazidis. And so it wasn't just them, they were actually recording what they were doing and letting the world see that that was what they were doing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was very blatant, wasn't it? Very, very explicit, very clear from ISIS.
Yeah, بجبر وقت كتينا عراقي دا راستا تعدل همو أقليات أكرن بس كمسيحي وأقليات ديدرو قوت نوعان هكوات في دراف بدن هكوات في دين خو بغيرين وهكوات في درك هفنش في دري هرنا وكا كردستان وبغدايوان شوان رسيتش تابون بس وقت هاتينا ما وكا خويا كرن بريدا قوت نما إنه يا أما هني دين خو غيرين يا أما كشتنا وهكا كشتن به كشتنش ميرارة به وهكا ودين خو غيران جي هر مير لازمة بينا كشتن يعني رياكديل برما نبو خويا كرنج عالمي رأى إنه أفملت جبر أم ديتنا أم كافر جبر أمنا not people of the book ثاني يعني نا خلقنا كتاب
people of the book
نا أهل الكتاب yeah.
So all the other minorities were also targeted, but they were given other options. They were told that they can either convert to Islam, they can escape into Kurdistan, or they can pay their way to not being killed. When they attacked Yazidis, they weren't given these options. They were told you either are to convert or you get killed. And they said, regardless, if you do convert, the men will still be killed. So they weren't given the options that the other minority groups were given. And they said outright that their goal is to end Yazidism and that they believe that Yazidis were kafirs or infidels and they weren't people of the book. And so it was...
You mean the Abrahamic tradition of, yes, okay. you weren't Muslim, you weren't Christian, and you weren't Jewish. So therefore you had to go.
يعني قوتون ونا فلينا ونا جهونا ونا بسلمان بجا لازم ون بين كشتن.
So the Genocide Convention, as you know, I'm just saying this for the students in the audience who may not know all the different aspects of the Genocide Convention. It is, first of all, you have to show the intent of the perpetrator. You've got to show that there was an intent to do all the following 5 acts. And you've got the ISIS leadership being very clear about what their intent was: to exterminate, annihilate, kill all of the Yazidis. So then the question is, do the acts themselves constitute genocide? And one is to attempt to kill, in whole or in part, a population based on defining characteristics. And that one was fulfilled. The other is to make conditions of life so horrible, intend to make conditions of life so horrible that they cannot survive. And that sounds as if that happened as well. Another is to make it impossible for that population to reproduce, and there are various subsets of that. But that was also the case in your situation. And could I just note, and I'm interested in if you would comment on this, that when you have episodes of ethnic cleansing, just in terms of, that's the word we use, to get rid of an ethnicity, it comes out of the war in Yugoslavia. One of the interesting features for us who study this is whether actually they really try to kill the men. Because killing men, abusing the women, killing men is essentially a very, very good indicator of a genocidal mentality. So you don't have to give all the discussion I just did, but this question, that it is, it's a feature of current genocides where they will, destroy the women, but they want to kill the men.
Evjel genocide adven waka mera bukujin na bijnete waka ونه بسلمان بين يا ونه مقارن حق بالنما بس adven bukujin yaksari دا وكا هكا جنب زارو بن أو زارو نري زدينا دورا راستا
يا وكا كأز وكاز فيت شتيدين بينم إنه وقت داعش هاتي كملتكي كتشكي وكا إز دابينه إنه وكملتش شمازند بن جنها بس مير وقت زارو تشيد بن جمازند بن وقت هدفي وان إنه ميرا بكو جن بمعنى كجن بتنمان جن نكاروي ملاتي مازن بكاوي ملاتي هكذا روجي تشيبون ويناتي زدي بنو هكا وسع شوية كي راست وسع إنه وقت مير هاتنا كشتن بمعنى هوا أف ملاد نامينه جن بتني نكارن بملاتي تمام بك.
When ISIS came in, one of the things that was happening was they were killing the men because the people that can carry on the culture and the religion are the men because they can reproduce. If a woman gets pregnant, that child is not Yazidi unless the man that she got pregnant with was Yazidi. So if they kill the men, then that's the end of the religion. That's the end of an entire race of people.
بري ويك جوا كبري داعش هي العراقي نبوج يعني هيش نهاد بداعش شنبوبو إجبار العراقي كتتشدين بالباسبورت أو الهوية والهمود شتتدن فيسا ديني تشيا كإزدي مسيحي بسلمان قالك إزدي إجبار خلقي باما عسكري أو بون بسدا وبهزارة جي حالة تشدبون أو تادنا كشتن الآلية سرياء هناك سيتراوان إجبار قالك وقت جارنا هاوي أيدوان دي تنشدي تندين وهنجي أويد قاعدة وتشتو سوان تكشتن هار السر آلية دين.
Even before ISIS existed or was a problem, in Iraq, on their passports, they put what their religion is. So many of the men that would work, even as interpreters or just working across state lines where they had to show a passport, if they saw that they were Yazidi, they would often get killed at the borders and at the tolls.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting how human beings don't like different human beings. They go after them. It's a trait we see. And it is also something that, unleashed, can move into genocide quite quickly. We have to be careful, don't you think? Yeah. We have to look everywhere, because you could see it sometimes in early phases, and it's out there.
وكا نبوي إنه مسألة إنه وقت كيفتش مرني حوالي شيء إجبا ما كيفتش مرنايات مرنا بيفيات علاقتنا دم كدين ودين بيه كلون بيه كجنس بيه كجبه بس نها نوس أبوي إنه كيفتش مرناي حوالي يجبر در كفي بل كتا مقابلة مكر وديتشي بس كهشتي وحدي إنه وقت كيفتش ديني مرنا هات لازم ببيع حرب لازم ببيع إبادة لازم ببيع كشتن لازم ببيع تاليا وملاتي كيف تجيرنا يعني كتي خطريك أقلك ما زندا إجبار وقت يك إنسان كيفاوي جديني ترناه يا شكل ترناه كاري ست إنساني دي بخور عقلي وبغيريني كيفاوي اشترناه.
Hold that. I can tell you're saying something that even sounds poetic to me. How is she ending that?
So basically she's saying if somebody doesn't like you because of your race or your religion or your background, they can just choose to ignore you or choose to walk away. But to be able to say that you want to end an entire race or religion or ethnic group is something very hateful and very strong. If there's a single person who decides that they specifically don't like that religion or don't like that race, they can recruit 100 other people and convince them not to like that race or religion, and that's when it becomes something bigger than it was, than just a simple dislike or disagreement about race or religion.
Yeah, it gets a different quality, doesn't it? It enters not just, ugliness, it becomes evil.
نعم أبو موقع يعني إنه هو جشتوي حدينا بس كيفاوي جران يعني لازم أبغى هتشتكي مازن خاطرية كمازن وقت كيفاية كيشترنا.
It has to reach a level where it's very powerful that somebody doesn't just not like you, or doesn't agree with your beliefs.
Mm-hmm. Now we have 10 minutes, and I would. There is a set of questions around legally, how are you going to get ISIS charged with genocide? And I don't think I'm going to ask you those, but I will say that if you have a comment on that, that would be great, because there's a legal problem. ISIS is not a nation state. Neither Syria nor Iraq have signed or ratified the Genocide Convention. So it's going to have to be the UN or the state of Iraq pursuing the Yazidis. I think you understand this, but do you have a comment on the complexity that I'm just raising?
شقال محكمة داعش فأنا أم فتشهر سالة بين سالة ما بعراق رد شغلن كبوافق سر إجبرت وكان زان عراق نعد وكشيء محكمية بس هار الأعلى دي جو وكا
So I made a mistake. I'm sorry. It's not that they didn't sign the Genocide Convention. Some of them did, but they haven't joined the International Criminal Court, is what I meant to say. So it becomes harder for the court to work through this process. So I'm sorry for correcting myself, but please go forward.
بس وكما تلبش عراقي كر إنه عراق كاري نبي عضو كشيء محكمة بس كاري ورقة كبتني بقدمينيا مجلس الأمن إشعالي قد يأذ يبتني بسر داعش بتني أم قالك وقبل رشغل بشهر سالة بس هيرد نينا سرويكي إنها أما بيترب علي يو إن وان رأت شغل كروج كيف محكمة بيها كرنها كهاد بلكي دعما يو إن جيبي.
So with Iraq not being part of the criminal court, they're not asking that they become a part of the criminal court, but they are trying to get their support on bringing them to justice in the criminal court. So they're trying to get Iraq support, and they've been working on that for almost 5 years now. But right now it looks like their best option is going to be to go the UN route and get their support.
Okay.
بس هتان هو شوي جي وقا تشينا بويا كم يقدع شبين يعني هتان هو همو بشتي في فرماني بشتي في خسارة ما همو داين بشتي في تعبام دركتين ومبايفتين همو الهيفينا بس يقدع شي سربي جينوسايد همو من المحكمة بينن هكا ياكي بتنيمي بس ببينن انه افتشتي ما كرينا شو بقيمات.
So far, that hasn't had much progress either to bringing them to justice. You know, all of the work that they've been doing the past 4 or 5 years is trying to bring ISIS to the criminal court and make them face their crimes. And she just wants to see, you know, at least one face the criminal court to kind of give validation that all the work that she's been doing the past few years wasn't for nothing, basically.
Mm-hmm. One of the things about getting the crime of genocide acknowledged and punished is documentation. And I know that you and your colleagues have been gathering evidence. You have a lot of evidence about the killings, the rapes, the mass graves. And that can stand you in a certain amount of power whenever you can get the political alignment for prosecution. The evidence is very important.
بهزارة النبسدة بهزارة إفادة تصوراندي كتشكو جنا وزاروك هكا نبين وجه قدرين هاتينا توثيق كرن إيزيديا چند مقابر همو ككيل كيدري وهاتان هو چند مقابر ونو هذا استفكرناوان كرينا جيبت كرنجي همو البامين وكا معلوماتي تهرت باشتري تسر جينوسايد البامين وقالك تشكوجن هينا وكا وجه قدرنانينا بس إفادة قدانا وإفادة وان البامية وداعش دوان بلكين هو اتساق جبن وروجك وقت بس محكمة فبي اتهادرن وان شهداء فبين محكمة.
They have thousands of witness statements, signed witness statements, and some on video as well. But many of the women that came forward as witnesses don't want to show their faces because a lot of their captors are still alive. And they also have reports on the mass graves that were just recently dug up, and they've been working on that as well to get even more proof. And with all the witness statements, if they do find some of their captors that were alive and are able to bring them to the criminal courts, that way they have witnesses that can come forward and speak on their behalf and kind of give their accounts as well.
The other major campaign that is linked to this is what you're calling restitution. At least that's the English translation for it. I'm correct, that you are seeking restitution as well as justice.
إجبار تشب سري ما هاتيا وقت شلوم طلبة عدالة تكن أم طلبة بسلام إجبار إزدي بو 5 سال 350,000 إزدي شنقال هيج المخيمات هذا خلق هطانها هاجرت ببدولتات كبي إجبار يك أم نزانن أم يتشلو إنا حماية كرن إجبار وقت حماية النبي بل كده هند وقت عجارة كديبين تشتي مهم إنه هم متخوازن كم كارم روجك الجهد خفا قرين كم كارم بكرامات بعيشن حمايتك باش.
There's over 350,000 Yazidis displaced in refugee camps currently, And
Say that loudly so people really
sorry.
hear it. Yeah.
There's over 350,000 Yazidis in refugee camps that are displaced currently that went through the genocide, and all of their fates are very uncertain, and none of them really know where their future holds, and so they would like something saying that they would be able to return back to their homes, because if they don't know what their fate is, that leaves them vulnerable to another group like ISIS attacking them again. And it would be very helpful and very good if they could have their homes repaired and be able to return back to their homes and be ensured safety there.
So this is the difference really between reparations, the English word, and restitution. You're not asking for money or payment. You are asking, and that's, I just want the people to know that this paper, the Sinjar 2018, reads like a briefing by the entire international community, humanitarian community, to the UN, saying they need demining, they need the land back, they need to have water pipes built in, they need to have their homes rebuilt, the kids need education, they need health care, and we have to create in Yazidi land a home where people can go back to. That's what the program is. It's nothing less and nothing more.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. لأنه وقف إنه فيديو كاريمة إجبار وكم قوتي أو خلك همو تشتكي وان نبو هيش كدنيا الوردة بون أو بهمو تشتي خاسرينه بيهترش سالوني بكي أما بوزارة خارجية أمريكا رب دعماوي وبدعم حكومة فرنسي بريا منظمة ماك أم عبوا راتكن بس عبوا شنغالي وهاتانها تقريبا دقمند ماينه هيشت عبوا كرين آفش بنينينا آفل ويدري تعليم بري قالك يا ضعيف وبشتهين جيج تعليم تزاني شا مدرسة وإنه هاجي في بشتهين جي بيستر بويا وإنهم الشنغال هم ويدا يك مستشفى هبو أو جي داعش خراكر إنه أشقال يسحة وتشتوانج بني بفتشنينا.
You're going to have to stop for a moment because you can't remember everything.
So that's kind of what they've been working on the last couple of years,
Yep.
is trying to get those reparations. Right now in Sinjar, there's no water at all. And, you know, the people that lived in Sinjar, they lived there their whole lives. That's all they've ever known. So when they left, they don't have anything left. That's all they have. And so they also, even when they did have schools in Sinjar, they weren't very good. And they only had one hospital in Sinjar, and that hospital has been bombed as well. So even if they were to return home, they don't have much to return back to.
أو أحبوا تناقو أحبوا ديماين.
Oh, and she's also trying to work with the different organizations, the American government and the French government, on demining
Yes.
Sinjar.
Yeah. It's almost finished. Yeah.
And that project's almost finished.
Good.
Yes.
That's the first step, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is a very tall agenda, a very steep hill to climb. Not only bring the perpetrators to justice in a world where that has proved clumsy to do, but also to create and recreate a homeland. You may not be able to go home in that deep spiritual way, but for the 350,000 people who were scattered, it sounds as if the only way they are going to have a culture and a future is if they can come back together and live in Sinjar. Is that correct?
Yes. وقب بجنس سدو بينجي هزاري الكامبايا بيحترش هفتي هزاري وقريا شنغالجي وأم مخم لدقي كتشكنم همونا من 9 مليون وقتی ما دوش أردی قوة شمارة نهاتا حماية كرين وقتی نهاتا آفا كرين وبشتي في داعشي بلكي 10 سالة دي ملاتش بني نميني هكا همو ندابو همو بآليادة جو.
There's not very many Yazidis to begin with. There's only about 500,000. And there's, with the 350,000 displaced and in camps, there's also about 70,000 that have returned to Sinjar. And one of her concerns is that if Yazidis are kind of spread all around the world, Yazidism isn't going to survive, and it's not going to stay, and they're not going to keep their traditions and culture going, and it's going to end up being dead like ISIS had intended.
We've got it. I think we understand how extraordinary and difficult the road you have set out for yourself is going to be, but also how crucial it is, how absolutely crucial it is for the survival of the Yazidi and probably for your future happiness.
Thank you.
Yeah, and could I just ask you to say something for the people who've sat here and are clearly attached to you, because they're not making very much noise. Very few people have left. They're listening. They're listening here. These are Harvard students, Harvard professors. What do you want them to remember from today?
وقت شتي مدببة بيراوان وشتي ديم أزش خورد بيجم إنه تشتكي شوي باشترنينا يعني شمرة تشتكي شوي خوشترنينا تكاربي الجهة خبرنا دي هتا دنيا بسلامتي بعيشي وتشتكي شوي بزحمة ترنينا مجبور بي تتركات ثقافة خوا ودين خوا وحياة خوا بدي جبست بقى جهكي آمن.
She would just like everybody to remember.
And this is you say this for her.
She would like everybody to remember that something that I always tell myself, there is nothing more difficult than having to leave everything you know behind, your family, your religion, your everything behind, just to get to a safer place. So if you can find some place where you are safe and are able to practice your religion and have family, to just never let that go and never take it for granted.
وكم غير بيت بشم إنه يعني يرو كارن مسير خوا بوقت أول جهكي آمن وكاربن بخوندن أمي وقا البيدري كارن إنه فان فرصة هيا كاربن بيهترش ما خلقي ويدري كدنجي إبادة جينوسايد بقهينن كبيهتر عالمي بملاتت وكي ما يكتشك بحسينن إجبار فان فرصة بيهترش ما خلقي الويدري هاي.
And you are in a position where you can educate others about what is going on and also help out with what's going on in Iraq and what has happened to people with the genocide. And because you are in a safe place where you are allowed to voice your opinions and kind of take action on these sorts of injustices, you have more of a force and more power than many of the people in Iraq. So just, using your power for good.
Using your power for good. I think that is a place we can stop, because this is a very important place here, Mem Church. It's ecumenical. I've explained it to Nadia and Shanaz. It's ecumenical. It has a long history. The men and some women who have died from the Harvard classes and the Harvard faculty in all the wars, their names are there. So prices have been paid for us to be sitting here in these positions of knowledge and privilege. And I think this encounter, this conversation with you, Nadia, has underscored for us, A, how fortunate we are, us in this room, and B, what deep responsibility comes with having good fortune. We are responsible for many things now, and we need to help you accomplish your justice and your restitution. And thank you for sharing this time with us. Thank you very, very much. Shanaz, thank you.